Hi everyone, I'm Esther Jolley and I'm going to be focusing on managing brand extension to drive revenue and brand strength. We've got quite a wide audience on this call and this is a big topic. So I'll be explaining briefly what licensing is, some examples of companies doing it well, why you should consider licensing as a model for your business. For those of you who are already licensing your brand, it may prompt you to consider whether you have an opportunity to maximize the licensing you're already doing, or whether you can pat yourself on the back for being well ahead of the game. We'll also have a look at a case study of a brand that's been in trouble recently, but where an existing licensing program may help the brand survive long term. As I mentioned, this is a huge topic and I'll only be able to skim the surface, but hopefully it's enough to whet your appetite and get you thinking about possibilities for your brand. So as a little bit of background about me, I've spent most of my career in the brand licensing industry. It's sometimes referred to as trademark licensing or consumer products licensing. And I've worked for two of the biggest global agencies where we worked on behalf of brands. And I also worked for a licensee, so I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been lucky enough to work with some fantastic brands, including Coca-Cola, Mercedes-Benz, Hershey's, Procter & Gamble, Harley-Davidson, and Jaguar Land Rover. And I've also worked across multiple product categories and with licensees from all over the world. And I've very much worked on the commercial side of the business, helping brand owners set strategy, find and negotiate with best-in-class licensees, and once licensees have been signed, overseeing the process and optimizing the program on an ongoing basis. So I'm a big fan of licensing and I really hope that presentation is going to give you some things to think about. So what is licensing? Well, the purpose of a license agreement is actually quite straightforward. One company grants another company the right to use its intellectual property, usually in return for financial reward. And a range of IP can be licensed. For example, brand names and logos, ingredients, technology, design, copyright, trade secrets. During this presentation, I'm mainly going to be focusing on licensing in the consumer products business. So a license agreement is created between the parties, the licensor and the licensee, and it defines exactly what the licensee has rights to, what they can and cannot do, and any financial guarantees they will owe. It specifies the IP that can be used, the term, so how long the license is for, the products or services that can be developed, the countries the licensee is allowed to sell in, the distribution channels they're allowed to sell in. For example, they might be allowed to sell in department stores, DIY stores, or online, but it might be specified they cannot sell through certain other channels. The royalty rate. So for every product that's sold, a percentage of the sale price is paid back to the licensor as a royalty. Financial guarantees, it's typically a minimum payment that will be owed by the licensee to the licensor, regardless of how the business performs. And then there'll be a marketing contribution. The licensee will be required to spend a certain amount of money on marketing the product or services over the term of the agreement. So what IP does your business own that can be exploited to increase revenue? As we go through the presentation, you perhaps want to keep that question in mind. As I mentioned, I'll be focusing on the consumer product space, but the principle of licensing can apply to any IP. I'm going to start with some examples of brands which have extended into new categories through licensing and are reaping the financial rewards, often without us even being aware. And in fact, the best licensing is where the consumer is totally unaware that there is a third party running the business. So Disney's are masters at licensing. In fact, in terms of retail revenue generated, they are consistently ranked #1 in the list of global licensors. Disney's obviously a huge business and also incorporates Star Wars, Marvel, and more recently they acquired 20th Century Fox. So they have a huge IP portfolio, and Frozen is one of their biggest franchises. In 2018, they reported retail sales of licensed product worth $54.7 billion. Now, retail sales are used as the measurement, so the royalty figure to Disney will actually be much lower. You get the idea of how much value is being added to the brand as a result of their licensing activity. So Disney makes a lot of money through making movies, but they also make a huge amount of money through products sold on the back of those movies. And they license into a large number of categories. And because their content reaches a global audience, they are able to have licensees all over the world. Disney is not an expert in making yogurts, and you'll see on the bottom line there a set of yogurts with frozen imagery. So they're not an expert in making yogurts, so if they want to sell frozen branded yogurts, they need to work with a company that are experts. So in this case, the yogurts are made by Danone. Danone is an expert in yogurt making, and so they become responsible for the Disney yogurt business, responsible for product design and development, manufacture, marketing, and distribution and selling. Stanley, a brand that you'll have no doubt seen on your visits to DIY stores. They often have a wall of products like this one. And in 2018, Stanley reported retail sales of licensed product worth $1.84 billion. And they were ranked number 34 in the list of global licensors. So it's a much smaller number than Disney, but still, that's a huge amount of revenue coming into the business from products that Stanley don't develop, they don't manufacture or sell themselves. And Stanley are often used as a case study for what we can call seamless licensing. You as a consumer would likely have no idea which products are made by Stanley and which are made under license. And that's how it should be. The execution should be seamless. Stanley tools are synonymous with quality, reliability, innovation, and value. And it's important that licensed product is created in line with those values. It can't be what's sometimes called a label slap, where a generic product is just placed in Stanley packaging. So the products you see here are all made under license. The product in the middle of the top row is a pressure washer. It's a specialized category, and so Stanley choose to license out this category. And via their licensees, Stanley reported that they launched 700 new licensed products during 2019. Obviously, that's a huge number of items for any business to launch in a year. But Stanley now has all those products in stores. Their consumer can see that their brand is expanding, but they didn't have to pay for any R&D. They didn't pay for any manufacturing costs. They don't pay for any warehousing or distribution, and they don't pay for the marketing. In fact, they'll spend virtually nothing. At a very basic level, Stanley will just approve product and the marketing plans and then collect royalties. The Hershey Company. They own many brands, but Hershey's and Reese's are perhaps two the best known. And Hershey makes confectionery, but also makes a lot of money through licensing out their brand name into food and non-food products, with food being by far the most lucrative area. And in 2018, Hershey's reported retail sales of licensed product worth $1.6 billion, and they were ranked number 38 in the list of global licensors. And these are examples of their licensed product. So the 4 Hershey's products in the darker brown packaging, that's biscuits, cereal, ice cream, and soy milk, they're sold in Asia. And the Reese's ones in the orange packaging, that's the coffee creamer and the ice cream cake, are sold in North America. Licensing is an excellent way of entering not only new product categories, but new markets. So Hershey are able to have a very successful licensing program in America, but perhaps surprisingly also in Asia, even though the confectionery is not so widely available. It's because the consumers are already aware of Hershey as a brand. And because Hershey sell their ingredients, they're able to get a double whammy. So not only can they make their money from their brand names, but licensees also buy ingredients off them from their licensed product. So chocolate, cocoa, and syrup all coming in. So effectively, they're getting paid twice. Akili is a long-term client of Julius's and of Stobbs, and many of you will probably recognize her iconic leaf prints. I wanted to include the brand here because it's a great example of how designs can be licensed. Initially, Orla developed a range of bags, and that's what she became famous for. And once her brand became more well-known, she was able to expand into product categories and new markets. And these images show other licensed homewares products which use Orla's designs. And in fact, these are from a recent John Lewis and Akili partnership that was launched just before we went into lockdown. You may also have heard, though, that a couple of years ago, the Akili brand went into administration. And one of the reasons I believe that the brand has been able to regroup and continue is that it has a solid licensing program. So revenue has continued coming into the business from online sales and licensees despite the stores closing. But before we move on, I just want to take a quick look at licensees and who they are. So I expect that unless you're familiar with the licensing industry, you won't have heard of any of these companies, but they are all big businesses in their own right and hold many licenses for globally recognized brands. So we've got Helen of Troy, who are specialists in housewares, health, home products and beauty, ILG, watches, Seinler, apparel, designer parfum, fragrance, Husky, refrigeration, and Luxottica, eyewear. But not all manufacturers have capability beyond just manufacturing the product and selling it back to the customer. So the best approach for a brand looking for licensees is for them to work with manufacturers that already hold licenses for other brands, so their capability to handle a branded business has already been proven. And Sofilo is one of two major licensees in the eyewear category. The other is at Luxottica, one of the logos that was on the previous page. And that's not to say that these two companies are the only licensees for eyewear. They're not, but they are considered the biggest and best. You can see here all the brands that Sofilo have in their portfolio. And the talent of a licensee like Sofilo is to make sure that even though they're making lots of glasses for different brands, as a consumer, you should see the brand handwriting on the glasses and cases, and not just a logo slapped onto a generic frame. So the look and feel of Marc Jacobs eyewear, for example, should look different to the Tommy Hilfiger eyewear. The DeLonghi Group, also a licensee. So the group manufactures their own brand, DeLonghi, but because they're a specialist in small domestic appliance business, they can also manufacture for other brands under license. They already have an established route to market, and as long as the positioning of other brands doesn't cannibalize their DeLonghi business, they can go to one retail buyer with a portfolio of options. So why do brand owners love licensing? There are a number of reasons. It can help them protect trademarks. It enables them to extend brand reach and consumer touchpoints with minimal investment. They can enter new markets, categories, or distribution channels where the brand has no expertise or perhaps just doesn't want to set up and run the business. They can trial new product categories with minimal risk. And there will be increased marketing of the core brand because the licensees will all engage, of course, in their own marketing. And then most of the royalty revenue goes straight to the bottom line. So what's the catch? I'm sure you're thinking that this all seems way too easy, getting other people to build your brand for you while you just watch the money roll in. So obviously brand owners do have some concerns. Just want to show you a couple of products here. So on the left is Cheetos lip balm. So Cheetos are the US equivalent of the UK Wotsits, and they made a lip balm from this flavor. And on the right-hand side is the lighter company, Zippo, who extended their brand into fragrance. And I don't need to make a lot of comment on these, but they have been raised as perhaps license or brand extensions that the brand owner might not, with hindsight, be so happy with. So the main concern of brand owners is typically reputational risk. What if my brand is damaged? What if someone in my organization approves product that's not entirely appropriate? What if we sign the wrong licensee? What if licensees sell poor quality products? What if the products end up in the wrong type of stores or are heavily discounted? The other related concern comes up is that brand owners may just not have the in-house expertise to properly manage licensing activity, and it sometimes just stops them from trying or maximizing the opportunity. But all these concerns can be easily overcome. If the brand has a good strategy and a well-executed and managed program, the risk is actually very low, but the rewards that we've seen can be great. And as with many things, if you do the work at the beginning, create the right strategy, find the best licensees you can, carry out extensive due diligence before you sign them, and then create a good ongoing working relationship, most of the risk can be very well managed. And since we're in a time of challenge right now, I just want to look at Laura Ashley as a case study for how licensing can create value for your brand, particularly at a challenging time. And as you've probably heard, Laura Ashley recently went into administration. And we know that for some brands and retailers, they enter into administration never to be heard of again. But licensing may be a way to keep the brand alive. So Gordon Brothers, a restructuring firm, has bought Laura Ashley, and they bought the assets, including the global brand, its archives, and its related intellectual property, as well as the online store. But interestingly, they didn't take on the physical stores, which seems to have been where the financial issues lie. Now, Laura Ashley has had a licensing program for some time. In fact, I believe they have around 70 licensees globally who are all still selling Laura Ashley licensed product. And they also have numerous stores that are being run as franchises. And that essentially means that someone else is running a store under license. And I think this is pretty interesting for the new brand owners because it means that revenue is being generated from the brand through licensing. And as we've looked at, that revenue is coming in without the Laura Ashley business needing to produce or own any stock or carry out any marketing or worry about getting product to the consumer. So the next few slides just give you an idea of how many categories Laura Ashley has entered through licensing, and each one of these images represents a different licensee. And what's interesting is that Gordon Brothers have indicated that a major part of their strategy going forward will be to continue expanding the portfolio of licensees and franchises internationally. And I think this is a really good plan because they don't have to own any shops or stock, or not until they're ready to, but they can still continue to generate revenue. The brand has a really large archive of prints and more can be developed. The online store does well and more stores can be opened by franchisees. And at the end of last year, a licensing agency was appointed to help the Laura Ashley brand extend into China. And assuming that this is continuing even though the brand is under new ownership, it shows again that licensing can be a great way to enter a new market, and particularly one as complex as China, where you really need local market knowledge and expertise to succeed. The other bonus, perhaps, is that the average Chinese consumer will not be aware of the challenges the brand has been facing here in the UK, but will be able to buy into the quintessentially British brand with the beautiful prints. And so perhaps the brand can be established in its own right in a new market. There are so many possibilities, and I believe an interesting strategy for brands to think about. Enabling brand extension, but managing the risks of overexposure on inventory, for example. So, in summary, brand licensing is a great way to extend your brand to help build brand strength, drive revenue with minimal risk, if handled correctly. And so wherever you might be with your licensing journey, we can help you. You might never have considered licensing before or just be starting out. Maybe you're doing some licensing, but possibly not maximizing all opportunities. Or you could want to reevaluate your existing program or address some challenges you're having with existing licensees, or perhaps just make some adjustments. There might be other challenges you're facing, such as counterfeiting, or you might need help with online brand enforcement, and we could help with that too. Just let us know. So I want to thank you all very much for joining, and I hope this has sparked some ideas or things to think about.